Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is you're listening. Welcome to Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Scott Forrester. He is an author, a Feldenkrais practitioner,
Yeah,
podcaster, and licensed physical therapist assistant. And I can't believe I pronounced that correctly. Is that right?
that's correct. Yeah.
Is there anything? Let's start there. What is a Feldenkrais practitioner?
All right. So a Feldenkrais practitioner, that's a form. Whenever you have a method that gets named after someone, you have to put up with the name. So that is a method of somatic education. Somatic education, soma refers to the living body. So it's a form of learning with or through the body.
Okay.
It's so I'm actually teaching a couple classes a week. It's taught in two different modes: awareness for movement, and is the group class name, and functional integration is the name for the one-on-one work. It's the same work, but just done either verbally or verbally and with the hands.
Okay. Can you just explain a little bit like what it looks like?
What it looks like?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the classes, uh, these particular classes I've been doing since January, and almost none of the movement lessons have been the same. Uh, there is really only one lesson, and that's how you move your attention around and within yourself. But so the last lesson, we do them on Wednesdays and Fridays. So on Wednesday we did a lesson, and the class is really good. The people I had Friday I knew know how to take care of themselves. So we did a lesson that involved one person at the end of the lesson being able to surprise themselves, being able to put their foot on their head. And we did that with no straining, no stretching. And then, so we did that on the right side. Then on the left side, we did hardly any movements. And that was even better because we used a lot of visualization. After you know how to do it on one side, then you also know how to visualize it. And then some of the lessons have involved no movement at all. If you were watching them, we've done lessons where you just cover the eyes and improve your vision because the eyes are doing things while they're covered. And so there's a tremendous variety. Uh, a lot of the lessons focus on most of the ones we've been doing are awareness for movement, focusing on awareness, but they have a heavy emphasis on function also. So you end up with a lot of movement surprises. Uh,
So people, unless you're watching this, you can't see my face. So
yeah,
I am like, huh, a little bit, and kind of turning my head to the side because it's fascinating to me. I find it fascinating and
yeah,
interesting. And I can tell you, like, because I'm an energy worker, I
uh-huh.
biofield tuning with tuning
Yeah,
forks and Reiki master and all of that. And I can tell you, just living where I live, heavily like old German country, right?
uh,
Like I'm like the unicorn around here. Like, so at least I feel like it. Although
yeah,
I know that there's probably people that are interested in the woo woo stuff like that. Um, and are kind of in the closet of it too, right? Like they're interested in these things that you can't really explain,
yeah.
but you have to just experience. And that's what I'm gathering from you is that this is just something that you have to experience and that before you can really wrap your head around it. Is that
It
accurate?
is. It is. Well, it is. Uh, Feldenkrais wrote a number of books, and so you can't, because he was a scientist, you can, if you understand the books, you can absorb his contextual framework. So you could kind of understand it that way. His book, Body and Mature Behavior, he wrote in the 40s. And so it has archaic language in it. And if you read the introduction to that and pay attention to that, then you might be able to understand what he's talking about. Maybe.
How did you land into this practice?
Okay, so this to me, this has made a huge difference in my life. I fell off a roof once, and I only fell 7 feet, but it was far enough to break an ankle. Uh, your body weight at 7 feet, if you're not don't land quite right, is still some force. And I eventually had that surgically repaired. That was successful. But in the meantime, I had developed a movement pattern with my knee that wouldn't allow me to run very well anymore. That was about 25 years ago. So I went to physical therapy and they made it worse. I knew they made it worse, so I didn't go back. Very sincere, nice people. Then I went to another physical therapist who was an ultra runner. He's about my age, actually. And he had won his age group in the Leadville 100 more than once. And he was familiar with Feldenkrais, but he wasn't a practitioner, didn't understand everything about it, but he did apply some of it. And I had been very interested in the method. I tried to research it online. At that, of course, in 25 years, what you can do online has increased dramatically. But so I became very interested in it, and I sensed that, for instance, the first person who made me worse, physical therapy, and I am a physical therapist assistant, so, and I've worked in it quite a bit, so I understand it. And if you want to get very generalized, every physical therapist is different, but if you want to really generalize it, strength and stretch. So if you have a problem, you just have to strengthen the muscles around the area. Well, I already had been relatively at the same time. This is not astounding, but I was able to deadlift 400 pounds. So obviously I was strong enough to run. But the problem was all your movement patterns are not in the muscles. We talk about muscle memory, we understand that, but the memory is not in the muscles. It's in the nervous system and in the central nervous system in the brain. That's where you have your movement patterns. That's where they reside. And you may have even had the experience of forgetting how to do something, but as soon as you pick up your hands to do it, you can remember how to do it. Anyway, so that was the first thing. But the real problem was just change your movement pattern a little bit. Now you can do it. I could go into detail about that, but the way we do things, this is profound because it doesn't just apply to your body, but the way we do things, the quality of the way we do them, the details of how we do what we do make a profound difference. So this is something that you would have to experience. However, it does have a huge conceptual framework, and you could understand that. The difficulty with doing it just from the books is you don't understand the person at first, so you don't quite understand. I could say a sentence, and if you don't understand the context of what I'm saying, words are always limited, so you get very little out of it unless you understand what the person is saying. And he writes in sentences that are paragraph long. So yes, you could do it either way, but you do essentially have to experience it. And even in the training, I was myself and others were getting about halfway through it, and we were saying, "What is this?" Eventually, you understand what it is. You have to experience it. So it became something that, with somatic education, is making big inroads into therapy too. Feldenkrais didn't want to. His method is so large as to become unwieldy in some ways. So you've heard of somatic experiencing, maybe Peter Levine, and there are so many techniques and methods that use that. But so Feldenkrais can be applied exactly to that, to therapy. The beauty of what he did is that it has great therapeutic advantages, but some of the results that you obtain are partly because you don't focus on the problem. So you don't focus on therapy. If you have a problem, if you focus on the problem, you have a problem for the rest of your life.
Welcome to politics, right?
Yeah,
Focus on all the problems all the time, and
yeah.
everybody's always talking about the problems, but where are we talking about
It
solutions?
applies to everything. So it's
Yeah.
made a profound difference in my life and even how I respond to everything. In my class, I've had the greatest compliment lately because people are beginning to say, uh, this is influencing and changing my whole life because I approach life in a different way. Uh, you could either, I often say, you could either do what you always do and do what I tell you to, or you could do what's right for you and learn how to take care of yourself and how to move from that place.
So who is this for? Who is a good candidate for this?
Okay, so if you want to advertise it, as you know, you need to, well, you probably know the difficulty of advertising what you're doing in your location. You suggested that.
Yeah.
But if you want to advertise it, you kind of have to appeal to someone, some particular group, because the problem with it is that it can help anybody. You're familiar with basketball?
Mhm.
So everybody knows Michael Jordan. But just before him was Dr. J, Julius Irving.
Okay.
Feldenkrais worked with him.
Oh.
He worked with ballet dancers. He worked with children with cerebral palsy because you're working with the nervous system. And uh, so it really applies to, it would apply. So a lot of people that think they're doing fine and are moving through life, maybe they're maybe they're fairly young, 30s and 40s. They probably wouldn't be interested because they think they're doing fine. It could improve them tremendously. But if you have cerebral palsy, or if you have neurological difficulties, or if you are an artist or an athlete and you have some reason that you really want to improve your skill level, the skill level that resides in your nervous system, then it's for you. So the problem is it could help anybody.
Well, and what I know about emotions and grief and trauma is that these emotions like that, these heavy emotions that our bodies remember, right? Our bodies hold on to
That's exactly
is in the nervous system.
right. Right. So, if you're doing energy work, there's
Mhm.
nothing. Feldenkrais, to him, there was not a mind body connection. They're exactly the same thing.
Oh.
So if you have, that's a huge difference between saying a healthy mind and a healthy body. So if what you were saying, everything that happens to us is held in the body. Well, that's because it's also all held in the emotions and in the mind, and it's held everywhere in the person.
Mhm.
So Feldenkrais did feel that working with movement was the fastest way to access the entire person. And
There's a question that's kind of noodling at me, and so I'm going to ask, is this like similar to like Tai Chi? Like qigong, like those types of practices?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So it's very similar in that it it emphasizes the mindfulness the same way.
Okay.
It's very dissimilar in that in Tai Chi you learn a form and then you can improve and improve and improve and improve in that form. Feldenkrais had hundreds. There's even literally thousands of lessons, over 1,000. So you come into the class, if you understand that you're doing the same lesson every time, but it has a different flavor, would you like to improve your eyesight? Would you like to improve your balance? Whatever. It's unique in that it's heavily uh, oriented towards function, but also in that every time you come in, you'll be doing something non-habitual. Uh,
I have a question. Have you seen people with conditions, maybe even rare, that have seen improvement in their condition using this method?
yeah, yes, you have. I've worked with people who had late stage cerebral palsy and so on. So yes,
Or near blindedness?
yeah. So I think it's David Weber that develops. Feldenkrais knew everything in his time. He knew all the scientists, and he was a black belt in judo, so he understood martial arts, and he even understood them to the extent that he wrote a book on the physics of judo. So, okay, so I lost my track. What was the question again?
With vision, near
Oh,
blinded?
vision, yeah. So that means he knew a number of things about vision. I think it was David Weber that's developed a lot of exercises there. And there, I can't remember the source, but there's a case study on a person who was legally blind. And he decided to do these eye exercises. And he was prescribed, you should do them an hour, maybe even 2 hours a day. He did them 13 hours a day. And he went from legally blind to perfectly acceptable vision.
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
I am just fascinated with this Feldenkrais guy. So,
He he had completely destroyed knees. And he was born in 1904, lived till 1984. So back when he did that as a 20-year-old, they didn't have the knee surgery we do now. But he figured out how to rehabilitate the function of the knees enough that he could practice judo, which
wow.
with no meniscus and no ligaments, pretty astounding.
Yeah, you would go to a physician, they'd be like, that's impossible. Don't do that. You'll just hurt yourself further, you know?
Yeah, he was cognitively and physically in the body very aware of what he could and couldn't do. There were He could move fine if he moved in certain ways, which we can, and not fine if he moved in other ways. He had to move within the stability of what he could do, but he understood that and felt that.
It's almost like connecting with the energy within the body to understand it and manipulate it where it can be manipulated, but then almost surrender to it where it can't be.
Yes.
Is
Uh,
that a
it's
good?
something that's very understandable, that's very profound. I'll probably butcher the quote, but find your greatest weakness and surrender to it. He said, most people spend all their life either covering up their weaknesses or trying to improve them. He said, those that surrender to their weaknesses are rare. And he said they actually lead every generation. So obviously, you can understand why he would say that. He has no knees, no
Mhm.
functional knees. But in surrendering to that, he found what he could do. He found his whole person. So that applies really to everything.
Well,
Well,
I'm gonna have to look into this guy. He sounds like a true trailblazer and renegade for his time. And
he was he was a pioneer in neuroplasticity when that term wasn't even used. And there was a brain researcher, Eileen Baki-Rita, I think, came to some of his classes. Her husband, Paul Baki-Rita Ward, won a Nobel Prize in, I believe he won a Nobel Prize in neuroplastic research. I think he was the man who took a blind man and hooked sensors to his tongue and hooked that up to a camera, and the man could see. Yeah, he's done that with, he proved a lot of things, sensory substitution that way. He's
wow.
done it with a person with a very poor vestibular system, and he put a helmet on the head so that he could. I don't I think he may have used a camera there too. I'm not sure, but then in fact in that case, the person eventually didn't need the device because the brain had been trained to be able to stand again. So
Well, this
it
has
is.
been,
So anyway, when his wife came to the classes, she said, "You are able to do more here practically than our research is allowing us to do in the lab."
well, this is fascinating. And
Yeah.
I do want to get to your grief story.
Yeah.
But so I'm sorry I kind of derailed the conversation in my
No, I,
curiosity, but I think it really is a good context into how it
yeah,
changed your life because
yes, it
you've
is.
had a lot of grief experiences and a lot of loss in
All in
your,
1 year. Yeah.
yeah. So let's, you were already practicing this, I imagine, for
Yeah.
years when this
Yes.
all
Yeah.
happened?
It
Yeah.
made a big difference to my wife and I. I was finishing PTA school, and I ran by a laundromat where my wife was doing the clothes. And I had thought about doing this, but it's very expensive in terms of you have to not work for 7 weeks a year. You have to find a place to live in another city for that long. Uh, then you have to come up with a tuition, and it takes 4 years, so it's quite a commitment. But there was no training offered near us, so that kind of shut that
Or
out.
you're talking about the Feldenkrais?
Yes, and so I stopped in to see my wife, and she pulled out an ad paper in the laundromat there, and there was a train that was going to start up within a reasonable distance, and she said, "You have to do this." And as difficult as it was, that was her attitude clear through the training. So it did make a difference with us.
So tell us about what followed.
So our training started in 2010, finished it in 2014. So it was much later. In uh, in 2022, in August, we celebrated our 50th anniversary, and we came back. So in September, it was, it's almost 2023, and 2 weeks or so after we got back, yeah, I worked in physical therapy, and she had a very tight calf. And I said, "You need to go to the doctor right now." So she did, and she had a blood clot, and it was removed, 45 centimeters. And in the meantime, at the same time that they, did a scan for the blood clot, they did a scan of the abdomen, and the physician came back and said, "You have stage 4 cancer." And so early in 2023, she began chemotherapy, and after about 3 treatments, she had a clean scan. So we were happy about that. But it was in the lymph system and it came roaring back. And after 3 treatments, as sensitive as she was to that, they couldn't give her any more because her white blood cell count was way too low. And eventually she tried radiation and another form of chemo that was probably not as effective. But anyway, so my dog, whom was not only a family member, I almost had a telepathic relationship with him. The only dog I'd ever had, I got him when I was 60. And he was very important to both my wife and myself. I won't go into that more, but he died in August, and we were both there for his last day. Well, I didn't say that my mother died in January. She was 99, so it was expected. She was very highly functional until the last couple of months of her life. So my mother died in January. My wife and I both sat there for his last day, and he was kind of a pioneer for us because he lived his life every day, and he'd had a couple surgeries and they couldn't do any more for him, and another mass came back on his mouth and other places. And I was building my son's house out in Christmas Valley, and it was hot out there. And so I left him with my wife for a few days, and I came back, and she said, "You've got to take him with you. He's morose here." So as hot as it was, as uncomfortable for him as it was, he wanted to be out there with me. And anyway, in August, he could no longer. He reached a day where his fever came back, and he couldn't get up. He could barely walk, and he just wanted to sit in a lump. And he couldn't get in the car anymore. And he never liked me to pick him up unless he was really weak. But he was afraid to get in the car because he tried it a couple of times and couldn't make the jump anymore. So I picked him up. He was finicking and he scratched me. But once he was in the car, it was fine. And then when he got out of when we reached the vet, he likes vets because they've always helped him. So he hopped out of the car and walked in on his own. And then they took him into the back room and put an IV in his leg. And he was fine with that. He'd done it before, and then they would do something, do a surgery, and he'd come back and be fine. So he was fine with that. Walked in on his own, walked to the waiting room where my wife and I sat with him, and laid down because that's all he could do. Energy was gone. And then they gave him the shot that slowed him down, and they gave him another shot that stopped his heart, but is extremely peaceful. And so that was a role model for my wife and I. She actually lived a year after the diagnosis. She made it through September of 2023 and passed in the very first hours of October 1st. But she lived, my wife had gone through quite a bit of trauma. Her mom died when she was 9. That's bad enough. But her dad was an alcoholic. And so he married another alcoholic. And so her stepmother hated her and hated her father because she was a terrific alcoholic and didn't know how to love anybody. And so she grew up with first the loss of her mother, and then people saying, you got to be strong for your father. Right? Yeah, that's backwards. But that's so through your early teenage years and later teenage years, you grow up in a family that's not your family. She grew up highly sensitive due to needing to know every night. Her father was a stable alcoholic. He held a job, but you need to know what mood he's coming home in every night. And So she actually suffered from depression quite a bit. And in that last year, she was never depressed. We were both really accepting of death, which is a good place to be because in our culture, we just kind of put it off into a corner. I'll deal with that in 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
But it really can enhance life to understand it. Anyway, so she never had time for that and was never depressed. And she lived every single day. Even when she was getting weaker, she got up and did something that was life every day. And that was true for her last day. My son visited and he brought pictures from the grandkids and she held a nice video call with them. She was fully into that call. And nobody, I didn't know, she didn't know that was her last day. So she was magnificent and she's my hero. She did not want to spend 1 minute in a facility and she didn't. And the timing with the whole thing was amazing because I spent a little bit of extra money to have some help to finish John's house. And I couldn't be in two places at once, but when I got it finished, that's when she really needed me at home. And so it's a huge, it's a bigger thing than you think. But you know, in the first week when you lose somebody that closely, you're holding their hands when they take their last breath, which was beautiful. But when you do that, the presence tends to be really strong, especially for the first week or two. And I got up one morning and I said, no, I didn't say anything. I was just walking down the hall. And it's a knowing whether I related it as hearing her voice. But she said, I will always be with you, Scott. And not too much later, I was sitting down at the breakfast table and I said, how is it with you where you are, Leanne? She said, oh, Scott, it's so beautiful, so wonderful. Wonderful, actually, the word. Whether anybody thinks that's a voice or not, some people understand. Some, it's a great truth because it says that life is sacred. And the right way to grieve is to remember someone as your hero and embrace life. So, you know, you could think, and it's reasonable to think that the right way to grieve is to be unhappy. But counterintuitively, it's not. So I've dealt with the loss is bigger than you think because if you're oriented correctly and you live day by day, you think you can deal with it, but you find there's more layers to it because she wanted to be a wife. That was actually her goal. It's not everybody's goal. A wife, a mother, and a grandmother. And she did that her entire life. I met her when she was maybe 18. We spent a lot of time together when she was 19, and she was married when we were 20. So her entire life, she did that. And that's all I'd ever known either. So you live day by day, you're doing fine. And then you find out that the loss in the whole is bigger than you thought. And you find yourself, you know, searching for something to fill that. And so I recently had an awareness that you have to relate to the past in a certain way. If you relate to the past as the beautiful blessings that you had, the fun times you had, or as the things that weren't right, but what you learned from them, you're on a good path. As soon as you begin to grasp and say, I wish I had that back, it brings you down like falling off a building. So never go there. The first time I had that realization, it was kind of like, oh, that's a good realization. I understand that. I see that. The second time it was like, I'm never going there again. Then I understood. But yeah, it was beautiful, but I still am in touch with her. But after 7 months, you have to be very quiet and just, I can still ask her questions and feel an answer, but
And what's her name?
Yeah.
What's her name?
So Feldenkrais, this thing about that was the beginning of really developing some awareness within yourself. You can use the method to improve your function, or as you were talking about, you can use that method to actually notice exactly how you are functioning. There are places that you can go to with a method that improve your sense of yourself, your standing, your connection with the ground, just how you feel it in an overall way. You talk about posture. There's some ideas about posture in the method, but there's a certain way of standing in which you're totally comfortable. And I couldn't quite go there. I thought that we had experienced a whole year of both joy and grief together. And I realized that there was even another level that we could have experienced. So you can tell that in your body, you're not quite ready to go to that place after you've experienced it and know what it is. And then later you are. So yeah, the whole idea of self-awareness has been expanding, throughout these entire last 10 years.
What's your wife's name?
Her name was Lee, but her name was always Leanne. Anne was her middle name.
And your dog?
Stealth.
Stealth. What kind of
Yeah,
dog was he? How old was he?
he was a lab shepherd mix, and he didn't quite make 13 years. He, if I had a dog now, I would have known their limits, but he was a very strong dog. And so I felt like he could do anything I could do. So when he was about 5, I took him on a hike through the desert from Walker Pass to Kennedy Meadows. I was lost one day too. So we were probably out there about 60 miles. And yeah, he was totally exhausted when we got done. He couldn't even walk very far. We'd really been through it out there. And my wife picked him up and, picked us up. Actually, I was at Kennedy Meadows store and she was up at the campground. I didn't know that. And I couldn't get in touch with her. His cell phones weren't working. And eventually I had somebody, I could have walked up there, but Stealth couldn't. So I had to leave him with the campground. I was going to leave him with the campground manager, but instead he took us up there. But that's how tired Stealth was. As strong and tough as he was, carrying his backpack and always leading the way. And I've taken him on hikes through the Wind River Range in Wyoming. And anyway, one day we did from Sonora Pass to Echo Pass or whatever it was in the Sierra. And we did 31 miles in one day. And the last part of it was actually getting dark. So we were walking up the steepest part of it to 10,500 feet, the rockiest part of it. And you can't see the trail. So every time you go to a rocky spot, you can't find the trail in your headlamp because now you have to negotiate out of this rocky area. Which way did it go? My GPS did that for us. But it took a minute to find the trail each time. We were crossing streams at night. 20 hours and he was right at my heel. I had to lift him into the vehicle. And yeah, so yeah, we did some big adventures together. And then finally he got to the place where I wouldn't do that with him anymore. He didn't have quite the stamina for it. And it was too dangerous for him.
So growing up, had you had any loss experiences, and what did you learn about grief growing up?
Okay. So basically, no. I mean, I was pretty isolated from everything. But both of my grandmothers did die. We weren't there for it, for their passing or anything. They both had funerals, and then that was way back in my childhood. The first one, my dad's mother. The second one was actually after I got married, and she was way up in her 90s, and she passed the way she wanted to. So those are significant. But then my father died when I think I was young, but I was 43. So it's not a childhood loss. But that one was in such great contrast to my wife later, 30 years later, because that one I couldn't accept it. And I couldn't even say that my father had died. I couldn't use that word. He was so strong. And, uh, to a kid, he seems invulnerable. And then he had Parkinson's disease, and a piece at a time, what he could do went away. I couldn't even say Parkinson's for years. And, 5 years later, I had trouble accepting that. And for 30 years, he's always been there with me. But that was a completely different experience.
I noticed you didn't even mention that as one of your losses.
No, I was pretty much focusing on what happened within the space of a year. It was pretty traumatic. And I think my wife she knew how much she meant to me, even more than I knew how much I meant to her. She knew what it would be like. And I think she guided me through a lot of it. But yeah, there's a 30-year difference between those two, and the intensity of losing three, actually four in 1 year, because I'm by myself, so I adopted another dog. And my son said that he would help with it, but in reality, it turned out he couldn't. And so I found that I couldn't really take care of him. But I kept him long enough. He was potty trained, and I kept him long enough that we found a really good home for him.
Why do you think you couldn't take care of him?
Because I did what I wanted to do was get a dog who was full of energy.
Mm.
And so he was like a border collie, and he was only about 7 months old. I could take care of him. But if I did, if I were retired and didn't have anything to do, I could take care of him because it took the entire day. I had to take him if I took him to run for 2 hours, he'd be okay kind of for one day. But I couldn't do that every day. So I had to take him for like 5 walks a day. And I had to keep an eagle eye on him to make sure that the potty training was holding, and I had to do all kinds of things. So I could have taken care of him, but I wouldn't have any relationship with people outside the home, drive to bed or. So it was either the dog, and you stay in the house with the dog for the rest of your life, or you can work with other people.
Is there a part of you that feels it was maybe just too soon?
Too soon to get the dog?
Mm-hmm.
No, I just couldn't. I don't have a fenced yard, and I don't have anybody. Having your wife at home that could watch him while you go to work or while you do something.
Yeah,
Yeah, I couldn't. I just didn't have the ability to do it.
So earlier you mentioned you just kind of made a statement about trying to fill the void. Those weren't your words, but to that effect, trying to fill the space and time and so what has
Not so much the time. I've been pretty busy, but the
yeah,
space for
like
sure.
trying to keep busy, I suppose, is maybe a good way to say it. Like you've been trying to keep busy. Is that
No, I'm just
no?
no, it's easy for me to keep busy. I have things that I want to write a book. I've written a couple books and I want to write a book about this. I think there's some useful things in it. And at least at least their story needs to be told.
What were some of the things though that you've found yourself doing since your wife passed away that
Oh,
are out of character maybe?
well, she loved to cook and I had no interest in it. So I don't know how to cook.
Mm.
So now you have to take that up. And she gave me some hints before she passed, and I've been feeding myself quite well. But so now you have to do that. And you find out that it took a lot more time to do some of the things than you thought. So now it's only me here, so it's not a big deal, but I'm cleaning the house. Um, I'm teaching my classes. I'm I want to write that book. I'm trying to find time for that. Eventually, switching over the cell phone, you wouldn't believe how much trouble that was. They keep sending you the bills for the person who's not there anymore and not on the plan. And switching insurance and doing all the paperwork. And she paid the bills, so I had to figure out what she was doing there. And then my son needs help. I have two sons. One's an engineer in Arizona, and the other one is on disability, and he needs some help. Although I'm proud of him, he's needing a little bit less as things go. But so I had to figure out his finances, and that was. And we have to make trips down to Social Security, and then that doesn't get, you have to go back. I was totally busy with that stuff for a long time, and so doing these classes, I put quite a bit of work into. And you're doing two a week, and I've actually kept them so I don't do the same class every week, every twice a week. I could, but so I put quite a bit, excuse me, into that. I can't think. I've been doing so many things. I can't really.
Do you feel like now, like the dust has settled a little bit, you've gotten a lot of that administrative stuff that obviously when your spouse passes, there's so much paperwork and you kind of hit on that a little bit. Do you feel like now is when you finally maybe have time to like sit with how you're feeling and sit with your grief and kind of maybe just now being able to do
Yeah,
that?
yeah, it's getting a little bit more like that. So something that's, excuse me, I've been crying. I mean, I cried a little
That's
bit,
okay.
but yeah, I want to get back to the writing. See, my time will be filled. If I have enough time, I would like to get back into painting. But something that takes a good chunk out of my day every day is that, you know, I have to get outside. I have to do. I have a friend that finished a 100-mile race not too long ago, and it was one with a big cutoff. And so I get together with her and we'll do 8, 10, 12 miles. And, and we'll go up. We did Smith Rock, the loop around that the other day for about 8 miles. And it has something in it they called Misery Ridge, which is just a big steep climb. But, and then we could jog back down a lot. But every day, so I want to spend, if I'm really busy, I only get outside for half an hour. But I like to spend an hour or two every day, to start the day doing something that's movement or exercise. And I do a lot of movement preparing for the lessons. But see, that is so important to me that I make time for it. So if you go outside and do heart rate training for 2 hours, it takes more than that. You had to make sure do whatever things are necessary to prepare for it. And then you're a little bit more tired, sometimes even requiring a nap. So that's a foundation to my day. because if I do live to 90 or 95, or like my mother, about 100, I want to be fully functional at that age. So
Don't we all?
I don't have any trouble being busy. But yes, the other day I was able to sit out in the sun, and there's been 7 days a week I'm busy. I'll go out and see my son at Christmas Valley, or uh, but I have had a couple times where it's been very wonderful to sit outside and just reflect. You know, in terms of filling the void, it's a little embarrassing, but I found myself. So yeah, I didn't want to just put myself in a closet and turn the light out. So I found myself reaching out in a lot of different ways, and trying to make new connections, which I have, and that's good.
Mhm.
But I found myself making new friends on Facebook, and trying to find people that live in the area, and it was not obvious to me, believe it or not, that I was searching for somebody to fill that gap. And because it's not what I was doing, but it was. It's not what I was doing, but it was in there. It's all I've ever known. So you're talk about a habit that's in the body and in the entire person. And yeah, I went to the store the other day. This has been a little while ago, and all of a sudden that became kind of clear, that habit, and that looking around. And I actually kind of cried, because isn't that obvious that you would do that? But it wasn't completely obvious. It became obvious. And so I think I've kind of indicated that all my friends are 20 years younger. Not all my friends, but my close friends. Laura's 20 years younger. I have a friend that may visit that I used to run with in Cheyenne. He's 20 years younger. My friend Carlos and his partner Monica are 20 years younger. Somebody in I I did go to visit some people at the senior center the other day on invitation, and I like the people great, but I couldn't go there again.
Well, I think just based on how physically active you are,
Yeah,
and your background knowledge and stuff, is it accurate to say that you are a bit of a unicorn in the population of your peers?
I guess so. I mean,
And that
I don't
looking where other people are is not where you are.
They don't do some of the things that I do.
Exactly. And
I'd
so
love to talk to. Go ahead.
how do we improve our lives? How do we better ourselves? It's by surrounding ourselves with people who are doing who
That's
are
right.
where we want to be, right?
Yeah, right.
Or where we're at. Was your wife very active with you as well?
No, she was always physically weaker than I was. She uh, on our honeymoon, we hiked 8 miles in and 8 miles back to the old mill, the Crystal Mill in Colorado. And on the way out, I had to carry her backpack. She was only 20, but she supported me.
And that's what I was going to say too, but she never took that. She allowed you to be you, fully you.
She did. She did. She supported me so much. In fact, there was a time when I get lost all the time. She was the navigator. but I do have some sense about where I am when I'm outside. But I had no experience to do this, and I was packing very light. And by the time I was lost a couple days,
A couple days?
I was lost a lot out there. And let's see, so it was between 15 and 20 years ago that I decided I was going to be in the Wind River Range and go from Green River Lakes campground to Big Sandy, which has totally changed now. And they were keeping it kind of wilderness, so there weren't a lot of signs out there. So you can imagine that was, maybe 78 miles or something. It turned out to be more than that for me. And I didn't know if I'd ever see her again, because what happened was an hour in, I dropped my GPS in the stream, and it was supposed to be waterproof, but it dropped into a deep part of the stream, and it took me a while to fish it out, and it worked. It was full of water. It worked well enough for me to find the trail one time, and then it never worked again. So I'm out there with no GPS. I did have good maps and a compass, and I thought maybe I should go back. And then I thought, well, I might never have the opportunity to do this again, so I'll go a little farther.
Man, you got gumption.
So I knew she would be at the campground for another hour or so. I mean, probably that day. So I could have gone back, but I didn't. And 5 days later, I walked out, and I lost so much weight that she didn't recognize me. I'm in the same.
You ran out of food, I take it?
I still had 200 or 300 calories left, but I
Did
had
you catch hell from her when you finally met up with her?
well, when I approached enough to talk, she did. But as I was walking towards her, I'm wearing the same clothes, but she didn't recognize me. And but anyway, that night before the seasons were changing in the mountains, I had a 1 pound sleeping bag, and it was getting too cold. I tried to get out of the wind because I didn't have a tent. I brought my rain poncho that I strung up over myself, which actually protected me from the rain, but not the wind. That last night I tried to hide behind some boulders, and my bag wasn't doing it. I was shivering through the night. My shoes were icy and frosty in the next morning when I put them on. So I was thinking, if it gets more than shivering, I'm gonna have to get up and start doing some jumping jacks or something. But anyway, we made it through the night. But that night, I was sitting up, and I felt her beside me, and I said, "She's here." No, she's not here. I kept going back and forth between them. She's not here, but she is. And the next day, it took me 4 hours to find the trail. It went through a rocky area. And anyway, so when I got out, she told me that she had taken, and this is not something she did all the time. She had taken my wallet and held it closer to her heart and projected herself out beside me. She knew that it was getting cold where she was. So she knew. So she wasn't very active, but she supported me in so many ways.
So you could have died. Were you not fearful? Were you not, like, what was going through your mind?
That last day, I had let myself get dehydrated, and the lack of food, which you can go quite a ways without food. I knew that, but I didn't know it in my body yet. And 5 days, it's enough to get hungry if you're not used to what you're doing and not prepared right.
Well, and you start hallucinating.
I wasn't to that point, but I was to the point where I didn't have any extra energy to think about worrying.
Mm.
So I was just pretty steady. You just kind of do what you go back, come back. I make it or I find it or I don't. Uh, you do get to the place where you're saying, "Oh, somebody help me." But yeah, I found the trail, and once I did, I was up to 3 or 4 miles an hour again. And
What I'm hearing in this story is it is a metaphor for grief, right?
yeah,
We are you can feel so lost. Like, can you see the parallels of getting lost,
oh yeah,
not knowing where the trail is, not like losing your path, losing your self identity?
I did lose my identity. I've been a husband all my life, and she was my everything. And she said to me before she passed, she said, yeah, we both wanted her to go first because I wanted to take care of her. That's always been the case. She was weaker physically, and yeah, she said, you are my rock. So you lose that identity. It's gone. She no longer needs my help. And you're right. And then it's every day at a time, one day at a time. And uh, so you learn new things. It is a metaphor for that. I could,
I see a book along those lines.
yeah, I really would like to say some things that I think will help other people because I'd like to tell her story. I so you know that all my friends are 20 years younger. And I wasn't looking for anybody, but I found somebody who I knew I could, I knew it would work with, but I'm not going to tell you the whole story. It's just too funny. But so this person was actually 29 years younger.
Okay.
Uh, so I went way out on a limb and asked her to marry me, knowing that very likely she was going to say no. So she did say no. So anyway, I wasn't looking for it then, and I'm really not today either. But that that hole is there. It's a good thing because it's what I've really needed. I recently talked about the difference between being alone and being lonely.
Mm.
If you're if you've never done it before and you're forced to be alone, you have to learn some things you've never learned before. And it's exactly what you need. So that's my story, or a
Thank you.
good part of it.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank, thank you for being a great host.
I would ask you what your grief has taught you, but I feel like you've fully answered that question. Do you feel like you've answered that question?
I have, but in looking over our wonderful marriage, and it was, I saw in retrospect, I saw areas where I really wish I'd done more for her.
Mm.
And then I got carried away with that to the point where, boy, uh, you could look back and say I was so selfish in some areas. When you're 20 years old and you get married, you don't know anything. You're just a dumb kid. So you have to everything you learn in life, everything we learn together. And so you can kind of get out of focus on that. Yes, I do wish I'd done some things even more for her, but you can't say I wish I'd known 50 years ago what I know now because it's impossible. So it's always a very beautiful thing. And then I for a while I got so carried away with which I do acknowledge and I do want to bring into life and other people's lives. What I learned there, uh, how much freedom and encouragement that you want to give the woman you're married to. So that's there, and I'm working with that. But for a while, it overshadowed what was something that was really beautiful, even though it was very imperfect, because it could not have been anything else. So yeah, that's another lesson.
So what has love taught you?
What has love taught me? Yeah, I understand the commitment. I understand what it takes. It takes a whole lifetime to build that kind of a relationship. Uh, the amount of comfort that we had with each other, we really were one person. And she has guided me through all of this. And love has taught me, look at the love, don't, and look at whatever lessons you can learn, but don't forget that there was something there that was beyond anything that was done. It's, you can't encapsulate it all in one mistake or one, love is something that goes beyond. It's more than the sum of the parts. The whole relationship, if it works in a marriage, is more than the sum of the parts. It works better than it should. It can work better than it should.
And what do you think is the key to it working for 50 years?
So I don't want to be too trite, but we were careful to be committed to that idea at the start. And I've been kind of astounded. If I look back, I see, I guess, there were places where it could not have worked. And then I've been kind of astounded when I'm getting a better view of what marriage is for people overall. And there are a lot of divorces. And so I've been kind of astounded by that. It's so logical that it wouldn't work. So I really have gained new understanding of that from a perspective of what, because, okay, so a couple of other things that I know, even in my wife's journal that she said I could read, shows up, is that commitment's not enough. If you don't know how to make the relationship work, commitment's not enough, because you're committed to something that doesn't work. So then the thing of communication is really essential. And you should develop the skill of nonviolent communication, of being able to communicate without blaming. But we always communicated, but we didn't even know that skill sometimes. So the person that can hurt you most in the world is your spouse. And if you have not shed a lot of your ego, everybody wants to be heard and everybody wants to be loved. And if you have a very strong egoistic way of doing things, which we all do, then somebody gets hurt and then they say, but you did this, as a matter of self defense.
Mm-hmm.
There's various ways that can happen. I just listened. Yeah, you've been very patient. I've just listened to an interview with, I think his name is John Gottman. And he was saying that after all the studies he's done, you could predict whether a couple would stay together in as little as 15 minutes with 85 or 90% accuracy. Because we talked about the Feldenkrais method, it's the quality of what you do dictates what you learn, not the quantity. So you can do a lot of quantity and you end up with neck pain or hurt because you're doing the same thing the same way, and you increase the intensity, but you're using the same habit. So because of the quality of couples interaction, they can tell. Just a short period of interaction would typify the quality of what you're doing. So do you stonewall? You don't even listen, and they know you're not listening, so they up the volume.
Mhm.
I mean, do you do that, or do you, even when you hurt one another, are you really seeking for something, really knowing that it's not even compromise, there's some truth somewhere? And are you really pursuing this, which we did, as a friendship, or are you trying to be right? And those little things, and you can eventually learn to communicate much better. But then, so that brings you to the other thing of you can't up your, what's the quality of your communication in the first place? Are you trying to be right, or, and that comes, you have to learn that because that comes through. But the friend aspect of it, is that the most important thing? And like I say, even beyond compromise, are you looking for something together? We weren't great at it. Just, I mean, at listening with a high degree of awareness. If you bring complete awareness, complete observation to that in a non-biased, non-passionate way, then you are observing your own self. Am I calm? You are observing your wife's body language. You are observing her words. You are observing how she holds her head. And you are seeing the meaning behind it. And if you don't, you ask. That's a high level of communication. And we didn't always have that, but we did have this basic belief in what we were doing. So you need that communication, and then you need that continued growth, that self-growth. If you don't have that, that's that's a hard place too. But if you have that friendship aspect, if that's really what you're after, you can keep going. I mean, you'll probably make it. What was very interesting in John Gottman's speech I was listening to was he said most married problems don't ever get accepted or changed, resolved, but they get accepted. So the friendship aspect is really what determines it all. If you want to go farther, you can, and you should, and it might be dangerous not to.
Well, and that's the foundation, right?
Yeah, but that's the foundation.
Mhm.
You can learn better communication skills, and you can learn not to put that ego first, and you can learn to do that. And then something that you should have learned that is becoming more a possibility in our culture. You can learn. We throw the word partner around. It's a good word, but it loses some of its meaning if you throw it around too much. But so to add to that, you can say you collaborate with your wife or your colleagues, and then you can go back to the use of the word partner with a different meaning as equals.
I had a conversation yesterday with a minister.
Mhm.
He said the most important decision you will ever make in your life is the person you choose to spend your life with.
Yeah. Leanne was eternally kind. That was so important. So, yeah, you're right. That is, and so you should be a little nervous about it and take your time. I actually, actually asked her before we got married when we were kids. I said, "What makes you think you can stay married?"
And what'd
It
she
wasn't a
say?
bad question.
What'd she say?
Uh, she she told me, she'd never experienced divorce in her family. Her mother was always there. Even her father was there. Even though her father got into a horrible marriage, he never left his wife. And I thought that was a pretty good answer.
What is it that you would like to scream to the world?
That I would like to what?
Scream to the world. If you were on a long hike and you were out in the mountains and you're at the top of the mountain, what would you scream?
Well, in a book, I would like to scream her story. It's amazing. Overall, I would just like people to know how great marriage can be, even though it's a process to see through. It's not great every day. It can become great every day, but that's a long story. I would like them to see how wonderful it could be. I would like them to see two things. One, the beauty of how much my wife or a woman can give. And then I would like them to see the wonder of what a husband, how he can lay himself aside. I'm not talking about you wear yourself out doing everything for your wife, but you give your entire heart to her elevation. Those two aspects. I mean, what she gave is astounding, and it's hard to put into words. But I would like overall people to know, what marriage can be, how you can get there, what a wife really, what a gift a wife can be, and I think there needs to be a lot more knowledge of how a husband needs to function in terms of putting his ego down, and any leadership comes from my entire heart is in elevating my partner. I Yeah, so the beauty of the whole thing, I cannot over appreciate the gift that she gave her entire life.
It's beautiful. Is there anything else that you would like to share that you didn't get to?
That I what?
That you didn't get to?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about even. I guess, yeah, the fact that I can still ask her questions and I feel a response just in the smile, or it, it's never it's not it's not really a loss. I only lost the physical things. Anyway, I thank you very much for the chance to share all that, even some of the most embarrassing things.
It was my pleasure to have this conversation with you. And thank you for describing this new, well, it's not new, but this, um, what do you call it? What was it called again? Um, the method.
Oh, the Feldenkrais method.
Yes.
If you need any help understanding that, get in touch with me.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that to my awareness, to my audience who,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many neurological issues out there. And as we talked about grief and emotions and how they get held in the body. And I see that it's something that could be very beneficial for everyone, just as you shared. And it's obviously been helpful for you in navigating your grief and um, bringing a sense of awareness to your body and being within the body, and has allowed
Absolutely.
you to live an exceptional physical life in older
Yeah.
age, you
Yeah.
know?
Without that, I wouldn't be doing some of the things I'm doing right now.
And isn't that the whole goal of, I think, all of us? You know, I'm 45. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be 50. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I could be 50. Maybe, you know? But that's the goal, right? To get to, as we get older, it's not to view it as a death sentence or a slow progression of debilitation and weakness and all of these things. And so I try and take care of myself so that truthfully
Yeah.
I can
That
probably take care of my husband because I feel like I'm the stronger of us two, you know?
really,
So,
yeah. Yeah. I could still lift my wife. Uh, so
and
it's,
it's
yeah, that's
incredible.
absolutely, absolutely. That's, we want to live our best life, and we don't want to accept unnecessary debilitation.
And that's the key, unnecessary, right?
So when you get out in the Pacific, unnecessary, exactly. And if we have the necessary, then we want to incorporate that into our life the best we, to be the best that we are. And if you get out on the Pacific Crest Trail, you'll find, you hike all day, the entire day. You take your breath breaks, so you make sure you eat and drink enough. But that's all you're doing the entire day, from when you get up in the morning to when you need to allow enough time to set up your tent.
Mhm.
But there's old people out there, and they're in shape you wouldn't believe. There's a lot of 20, 30, 40, 50 year olds out there, but there's older people out there.
Well, and 30, 40-year olds that can't do what you can do, wouldn't even dare do what you've done.
Yeah. I throughout my life, I have shunned any job that involved 8 hours a day of sitting.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
It's sitting, they say sitting is the new smoking.
that's that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was the saying.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing about Lee and stealth and your father and your mother and all the wisdom that you brought to our conversation. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. You were an excellent host. I enjoyed talking to you. Uh, get in touch with me if you want to learn any more about the Feldenkrais method.
And where can people find you if they would like to get in touch with you?
I'm actually reworking my website, but you can get all my contact information off of theawareathlete.com.
Okay,
Not,
I will
no,
put a
oh,
link,
not the Aware Athlete, awareathlete.com.
awareathlete.com, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
I'm actually, yeah, I'm actually working on a website that's not really live yet, the Aware Human.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. And you can find my books, the Aware Athlete book, the Aware Athlete. To find it, you should put in the Aware Athlete, the entire title. I won't give you the subtitle now, but the Aware Athlete by Scott Forrester. You can find that on Amazon.
And I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much
You know,
love.
thank you.